You're checking in with the doctor for the greatest fantasy baseball podcast in the world, starring your hosts, Dr. Fantasy.
I'm ready to rock and roll today.
And Rydawg.
Harrison Masturbator.
Welcome to Doc and Dog, your fantasy baseball geniuses, presented by the Fantasyholics.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doc and Dog, presented by the Fantasyholics. We are in the middle of our MLB mini-series where we will be talking about the San Francisco Giants today. My name is Jordan Jaika, a.k.a. Dr. Fantasy, and I am here with my co-host, the esteemed Rydawg. What's going on today?
Going on, Doc. Let's talk some Giants baseball.
Yeah, ready to rock and roll. What we're going to do, we're going to preview the San Francisco Giants today, talk about their lineup, their rotation, finish off on a few impact prospects, talk about the fantasy relevance more specifically. So this is, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. I think this is going to be the quickest one, and really not a ton of guys I'm drafting. So we're going to roll right through here and dive into their lineup. Kicking it off, leading off for them in the outfield is Mike Yastrzemski. Yes, he is related to that Yastrzemski. He is currently going pick 244, and I think he's one of the only guys that has any sort of fantasy relevance. He showed that he had some ability last year. He hit 20 home runs, drove in some runs for him. Average wasn't the highest. I think he was right around 260, 270, but you know, if you're looking to throw a dart in a deeper league, I don't have a problem with it. You know, maybe he gets you 25 home runs, 270 average, steals a few bases, 75 RBIs. I think that's kind of his floor. And in this offense leading off, he's also going to score some runs.
Yeah, I agree. I like Yaz a lot, actually. From a fan perspective, of course. He's definitely a guy that has some pop in his bat. For this lineup, he's definitely like their team captain player type thing going on. So he is the grandson of Carl Yaz, the great Yaz. So with that said, I've seen him play in Double-A with the Bay Sox as well. So I'm not going to. I'll take him as like maybe a last round flyer if he's there or whatever. But he's not a guy I can see starting just because of the lineup around him too.
Yep, I agree. Batting second behind him is the legendary future Hall of Famer, Buster Posey, who will be catching for him when he is healthy. He is currently going around pick 228. At this point in his career, his offensive ability is really limited. He struggled immensely with injuries. I can't even validate taking him as my starting catcher anymore. And there's no scenario, unless I guess it was a two-catcher league, in which I would take him.
Agreed. We talk about how catching position's not deep, and even if it's not deep, I would still not take Buster Posey just because he's not staying healthy, and he's just a guy that's just past his prime at this rate.
Yeah, and he's more there. He's a character guy at this point. You know, he can help out younger pitchers. His defensive ability hasn't declined as much as his offensive ability, and he's the kind of guy I guess you keep in for his character, but that's not putting up fantasy points for me.
No, it's not.
Batting third in that lineup is Brandon Belt, playing first base for him. You know, and we've talked about first base not being very deep, but Brandon Belt really hasn't shown a ton of upside the past few years. In the first base position, he really struggles to hit even 20 home runs. He usually kind of teeters right around 20 home runs. You know, he's not going to drive in a ton of runs because Buster Posey's not scoring runs for him. I can tell you that much. He has some ability, but, you know, I think even in a very shallow first base class, Brandon Belt isn't a guy I'm comfortable starting or even having on my roster.
Yeah, for me, he just doesn't make the cut just because he's really not as good as I guess you could say, as he used to be. He really was never really like anything special, but he's just a guy that's just there at this point.
And then batting fourth for them is Evan Longoria, playing third base. He's currently going pick 235. Once again, another kind of legend of our generation when he was with the Rays.
Yeah.
He still actually hits the ball extremely hard, which I was really surprised about. He was in the top half of the league, and he actually showed some promise there. If he does stay healthy, I think he's a name to keep an eye on because I do think he does still have some left in the tank, even though it's not as much as it was previously. But I'd probably leave him on the waiver wire, but just keep my eye on to see how he performs and if he stays healthy.
I agree, and I actually like Longoria a lot. He's actually one of my favorites of all time, since he's a part of that generation, like you mentioned. But he's just in the wrong team for fantasy purposes, unfortunately. If he was on a different team, I would love to take him. I think his stock will go through the roof, actually, because his numbers are there. There's just no ceiling or, there's no upside to it at all being on the San Francisco Giants.
Yep, I agree. And then I'll kind of go through the last three guys in their lineup and see if you have any notes on them. Brandon Crawford is their shortstop. I know that's a guy you said you might consider taking before we started. I personally think Brandon Crawford's more of a defensive shortstop, even in a, and there's so many shortstops that I think there's, if I had to do my shortstop rankings off the top of my head, he'd probably be right around 25 or so. So probably not a guy that I'm going to be taking. Number 7 in that lineup is Marcio Dubon playing second base. Really not a ton of potential there as well. Same thing. They have a very strong defensive unit up the middle. Then last for them is Billy Hamilton. Yes, that Billy Hamilton. He's just never lived up to the potential. He's always struggled to hit. If he ever had any ability to get on base, he would be extremely fantasy relevant, we're beyond the days now where he's going to be stealing 50 bases plus. So not much to say about either one of those three for me.
I agree. Crawford's also shown a little bit of upside, but he hasn't shown much recently. So he's not really a guy to take a flyer on now that you really say it, because there's so many shortstops available. But yeah, I'm just not taking any of these guys for fantasy purposes. Billy Hamilton, he's not what he used to be either. So he wasn't really anything special to begin with. He just has speed. He couldn't hit the ball to save his life. So.
Oh. Yeah, and I remember being in many dynasty leagues where Billy Hamilton went way too early a few years back. Let's move over to their rotation, which actually might be less exciting than their lineup. Apparently that's possible. And even their bullpen situation, they don't even have a really defined closer. So I'll roll through 1 through 5 here, and if you have any notes on it, I'll swing it over to you after. But their number 1 pitcher, I should say, is Johnny Cueto, currently going pick 244. Cueto obviously had some great seasons with the Reds. He struggled with injuries, hasn't really shown anything the past few years. My note on him is and I think that's a pretty good way to sum it up.
That's how I would do it.
It is what it is. Number 2 is Jeff Samardzija, going pick 258. So once again, they really, looking at it, they don't have one guy in their entire rotation, and it's probably the only team you can say this, where I don't think anybody is being drafted 1 through 5, which is, that's kind of impressive. So good on them, I guess.
Yeah, they have a goal for something. Jeff Samardzija and Johnny Cueto, I don't think they're scaring anybody. I guess Samardzija, if you want, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even want him as a streamer, because you could have a good lead on ERA, but you're looking for Ks, and then he could end up really screwing you on ERA really badly. With that said, I'm not taking these guys. Their pitching is just laughable right now. I'm not sure if they're trying to think they're a baseball team or what, but Cueto and Samardzija are both guys that are like mid-30s too. So what they're doing, you could ask me, and I don't know what they're doing.
I agree with you. Number 3 in their rotation is Kevin Gausman. I think he's probably the youngest in their rotation. He's the only one that maybe I would consider streaming. He showed some flashes when he was with the Orioles. I guess he's just moving from one terrible situation to the next. But he's the only one that really has a really good K rate. So if you really need strikeouts, I think he could possibly be on the streamer radar. But the other guys in the back half of their rotation, Drew Smiley and Andrew Suarez, are their 4 and 5 pitchers. Both of their metrics show that they shouldn't even be in the major leagues. So my notes for them are yuck. So
Yep. And that goes back to any fans out there can ask us, what are the Giants doing? We couldn't give you an answer.
yeah, and we'll get into their minor league system a little bit, not a ton, but they're ranked 10th right now. But they a lot of their guys are low A or single A, so they're 3, 4, 5 years away from even sniffing a winning record, in my opinion.
And that's the thing. Like, the Giants don't have anybody to really trade away to get better prospects that could be somewhat close to being major league ready. So I guess they're looking for 100 losses the next 3 or 4 years. And if that's their goal, they're succeeding.
Yeah, they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And then quickly touching on their bullpen, so even that's a messy situation. They don't have a defined closer right now. They have 3 guys listed as their co-closers right now, and Tony Watson, Sean Anderson, Trevor Gott. So nobody I'm taking there, so I'm just going to pretend that I didn't even say any of that.
Yep, moving forward.
Moving on to the last piece here, their impact prospects. I already did mention they are 10th ranked, so they do have a semi-strong minor league system. A lot of those guys, we'll see how they progress over the next few years. They have a guy lower in the minors, Marco Luciano, who I really like. He's still very young, though, probably at least 3 years away, but you might see him in the next few years move himself into the conversation for a top 10 prospect, depending on how he does. Only guy that you might see debut this year is Joey Bart, who's usually in the top 20 prospects or so. He will be the replacement for Posey long time, and if Posey does get injured, Joey Bart's ready for the show right now. He has an elite offensive ability, and actually, if he's in the majors, just based on how shallow the catcher position is, Joey Bart's probably going to be in the conversation to be a starting catcher for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, and that's one player. I like Joey Luzardo too. He's going to be very fun to watch along with Bart. Those 2 players, it's definitely a good start. But I guess we'll see what happens. I feel bad for those kids once they get called up and see the talent they have around them. And nothing against Longoria or any of those guys, but it's just not enough, unfortunately.
It's just crazy to think, too, because the Giants were one of the most formidable organizations of the last decade. They won several championships, and they fell very hard and very fast. So it's going to be years, and, I'd say, unless they make some big moves here, probably 5 years before they even come close to winning 80 games, I would say. I don't think they have any upside or potential.
No, and if I had to make a Final Four of the worst teams in the MLB, they're definitely going to be in it. I think it would be them, the Pirates, the Orioles, and the Marlins. That's my Final Four. And to really think about that, I could name the 4 worst teams that I would think in the MLB. It's kind of sad. So I just don't think the Giants are what they used to be, not even close. And like you said, it might be another 5 years. And they need to spend some big money fast if they want to somewhat make any kind of moves of not finishing last in this division, because you got the Rockies, the Diamondbacks, the Dodgers, and you got the Padres. So, you got so many teams in that division that's really, really ready to make a splash in the playoffs, and then it's just skewed so down to the Giants. So.
Yep, I agree. So I think that's all the notes that we have on the San Francisco Giants. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you don't already, make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Holics on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and make sure you follow us on Twitter at FantasyHolics1. So once again, thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
Peace out, guys. Follow us.